All right, we're just giving it a couple of minutes here. Let a few more join us before we get going. I hope everybody is having a great start to their week. Ooh, I apologize for that. Let me silence my phone here so we don't burn anybody's ears off with that. Good afternoon, Jim. Good to see you on board with us today. All right. Now we got a couple of people here, and I think we could go ahead and get this ball rolling. This is, of course, the illustrious third episode of the three-part series on the introduction to the private service. It is great to see some of these returning faces. Kelly, hello, hello, hello. I hope everybody's enjoying their week. I don't know about y'all, but here in Dallas, we're rainy today, and I'm kind of enjoying it. Using an excuse to stay inside and do absolutely nothing but poke around on Facebook. But again, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in. These slides today are a little bit, they're the precarious ones, and they are very close to my heart. And things such as that I've struggled with and in my tenure in this industry, as well as I see many other professionals struggle with these topics. And previously we discussed a lot of good information. I'm glad what we've been able to get out there. I'm glad people have been out there to absorb it, and I really hope that we've been able to reach some people, and they've been able to use the tidbits to either bolster your perception of what you're doing, knowing that it is right, or just learning a new tip or trick to help you along the way. Today we're going to be talking about some of the problems, or how to define yourself as being a professional, problems versus solutions, how to be service without being servile, and of course the wonderful creep factor that comes along with our industry. Let's go ahead and get started on our first part today. And this is one that really, to me, is a precarious issue. It takes balance and tact to execute. And the reason of that is you are a professional, and they have hired you to take care of their homes, their environments. But as anybody who owns a home, you don't want to just completely let go and have somebody else just run rampant and do whatever they want. So one of the things that we have to be aware of is there are problems and there are solutions. And in my opinion, what sets you aside of being a professional is what you're addressing. Let's start with the core of it here. Obviously, day in and day out, we are going to have problems. This is what we're there for, is to cut them off at the pass and make sure that life's minutia does not impact our principles. Now, there is no scientific evidence on this, and no studies that I've seen done, but I will tell you that most of the private service professionals that I've met are definitely left brain. We analyze, we develop plans, we set up schedules, we document, and that's a lot of times where our strengths are. We're left-brained individuals. I will say, with the caveat of that, of nannies who tend to be a little bit more right-brained, because they got to be more creative with dealing with the kids. That's why myself, I could never be a nanny or a manny. I just don't have it in me to do. Referring back to previous slides, that's me being honest about where I want to be in the industry. So honesty is still a crucial factor here. So, but this is where us as the professionals get to really use the right side of our brains and come up with creative solutions. Now, with that being said, let's see how we're going to force ourselves, and let's see how we're going to plan and force ourselves to be creative. So with every problem, countless times during the day, during the week, during the month, we have these issues that come up. So the problem presents itself. From there, you're not just going to run to the principal, say, hey, this is not working. The HVAC in this zone isn't working. You're not going to do that. The problem hits the professional first. You, me, house manager, whomever it is, housekeeper, nanny, groundskeeper, whatever. It hits the professional first, and it goes to the you, usually the problem solver. The problem solver then identifies multiple solutions for which they present to the principal. And the reason why this flow is so important is one, is that, of course, let me just skip to this section right here. To put it bluntly, they're not paying you to state the obvious. They're not paying you to tell them that there's a problem. Never go to your employer with a problem or an issue. Always go prepared with a selection of solutions for he or she to choose from. Now, of course, we let our creative juices flow with this. So let's take an example of an air conditioning unit that's not working. Oh, Mrs. Smith, you've noticed it, and you go to Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, I noticed that the air conditioner in this zone isn't working. I can have someone here in 2 hours to get it fixed, but since it is 4 o'clock on Thursday, we would be required to pay overtime hours for that. Or I can get them out here mid-morning tomorrow to address the issue. Now, what I've done there is a couple of things. One, I followed this thing. I've identified the problem. It's come to me. I've created multiple solutions, and I've presented it to the employer. What that's done is given the power back to the employer to make the decision on what goes involved or what's involved with his or her home. They still want to feel in control. And they need to feel in control. As soon as they start feeling they're out of control and they don't have a grasp on their home anymore, that's when it's going to reflect negatively on you. No matter how hard you try, it just is. Because you are the face of the mechanics of the home or the functionality of the home. So use your creative juices, multiple solutions. Now the principal can choose, well, you know what? No, this area, it's in a guest room of the home. It's not occupied. I don't want to pay overtime for it. So, Peter, thank you very much. Schedule it for tomorrow. Perfect. Or you know what? It's an area that we don't use, but I've got some art in there, and let's go ahead, and it's supposed to be 100 degrees. So let's go ahead and get somebody out here and fix it. No problem. Again, control, decision-making is in the hands of the principal. You never want to take that feeling away from them. That's why it becomes a balancing act, and tact is needed. If he or she come back and say, well, no, well, I don't care about that space. Well, then you can gently remind them, well, don't forget, Mrs. Smith, we do have that sculpture that we just put up there last week, and excessive heat and humidity can impact it very rapidly. Oh, I totally forgot about that piece. Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead and have it taken care of today. So these are just gentle reminders and guiding them to the right solution. Now, one thing I will say is after you've done that and after you've expressed to them what the best solution should be, your job is done. If they say, no, I'm not worried about it, even after you told them about this new piece of sculpture that they put up there, well, I'm not worried about it, just fix it tomorrow. You come in tomorrow and the item is damaged or tarnished or melted or what have you. Well, as terrible as that is, just realize it's not your fault. You put the decision in their hands. You gave them all the information that they needed to make the smart decision. And they chose to make decisions that were contrary to what you were recommending. That's fine. It's not your job to convince them. It's your job to guide them to what the best decision is. there are times where, I've had a dear friend of mine, David Barry, was telling me an example of he had a HVAC system that failed to work one time. The principals, they couldn't get anybody out in time to fix it. So what he did is he wanted to make sure that at least air was circulating. So he engineered a temporary solution with a box fan that allowed air circulation to continue to drive through the HVAC system, so they at least had air circulating through that point. That's where I mean about being creative. If they don't want something right now, or if the solution is just so left field that it's going to take some time to get repaired, then you need to start getting creative. You need to start calling your relationships that you've developed and come up with a good solution for this problem. Now, I'm sure, as you've noticed, I've already referred back to a couple of the previous slides. The honesty, this creativity and this balance that we have to achieve. This is part of it. Use your resources, use your friends, use your colleagues and your coworkers. They are there for a reason. You're not in this all alone. But again, the principals expect us to come to solutions with them. You don't want to just walk up to them and say, oh, the AC's not working. Well, yeah, no kidding. I'm sweating here. I can tell it's not working. What's wrong with it? So do your due diligence before you try to present it to them. All right, on to the next slide. Service without being servile. This is one that is a bit close to my heart, and it is because I have fallen into this trap on many occasions. And it is because of what Starkey considers the service heart. She did coin that term years ago, and there is something to that term. Now, let's start by defining servile. Now, servile is of or befitting a slave or menial position. Well, that right there, those few words right there just kind of, feel slimy to me. I'm not a fan of it already. Meanly or cravenly submissive. I will be the first to admit I've fallen into that exact category before. Not being confident in my abilities. Yes, sir. No, sir. Whatever you say, sir. Absolutely, sir. Instead of having that confidence to push back a little bit when something is not right. So, you got to remember, you're a professional. You bring a set of skills to the table. What is a professional? Okay, well, the textbook definition of professional is someone who is extremely competent in a job, someone who produces a job with the competence or skill undertaken or performed. Basically, meaning you're not just some schlacky that they hired off the street to come and push around a broom. You have a set of skills. Even if you take it to somebody like few of the hardest jobs in the industry, housekeeper and nanny. Yes, I could go to a high school or college and hire a nanny and tell them exactly how to care for the kids. But that's not a professional. That's a job. A professional is somebody like that Kelly Garris knows very well. They bring a set of skills. They're bringing an educational set of skills to the table. They bring a creative set of skills to the table. Nannies, the reason I don't do nannies because I think it's below me. I do nannies because I don't think I can do it. I don't believe that I have the skill set to do that. But I do have a skill set to run large homes and manage them. So know where your strengths are. You are a professional. Don't fall under the guise of the slave or menial position where you're just you're looking down at the ground and you're very submissive. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. I will make sure that turns better. It's like, well, no, I understand that this didn't go as it should have been. However, it could have been better if we did A, B, and C. how would you like to correct it next time? So again, service without being servile. Be confident in your abilities. Now, there's a fine line in this, being confident in your abilities and know when you're being taken advantage of. We have agreed to take on these jobs because we sacrifice of our personal time. But in a minute, we're going to talk about the creep factor. And that's what comes involved, is when you're talking about when you're being taken advantage of, and it's usually from a time perspective. An hour here, an hour there, it adds up. So, when there was a position just finished up with my wife and and I knew we were being taken advantage of when, prior to our last 2 months, we would spend 2 months out of state every year. And I asked Mrs., I said, we would like 2 days during that 2-month period that we could go spend with family, because we're going to be right there in their backyard. And Mrs. said, no, I can't, it's not something that she could identify. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't know what's going on. So you're telling me that within 2 months, in 60 days, you can't find 2 that you don't need me ahead of time? To me, now you're too heavily reliant on me. Now you're taking an advantage of me. You may not be doing it consciously, but you're doing it subconsciously. That is when the confidence in my abilities stepped up, and it ended up months later terminating the agreement because of that ability to identify when you're being taken advantage of, and when your abilities are starting to be ignored so that you can be taken advantage of. It is a very, very precarious, sensitive balancing tear that we all have to go through at some point in time. So how do you not be taken advantage of? One is that, that a backbone does breed respect, but so does respect. So I'm not saying to sit there and just stand up and go, absolutely not. A backbone is being confident in your abilities, knowing that you are a human being and knowing what the expectations are, and addressing these things respectfully. I would never go to Mrs. and just say, no, well, you're taking advantage of me on this. That's going to set up, she's going to go on the defensive immediately. And that's when the conversation is just going to go downhill. But if you start in the beginning, it's going to be much better received. So start in the beginning. If you do it later, it's going to be perceived as negativity. So start now. Start when you're interviewing in the job. Start when you are first starting out. Be okay. Be confident in saying no to something. But if you're going to say no to something, you also have to give them a good reason as to why you're saying no. Don't just say, no, I'm not going to do it. It's, well, I really wish I could, but I don't have enough time. What would you like me to give up over here in order to make that, to be able to accomplish that? Or would you like, can we outsource this? Well, Peter, I need you to run to the grocery store. Okay, I'm happy to. However, we do have several vendors that are showing up today. Oh, okay. Well, I'm happy to go to the grocery store, but are you okay being here with the vendors, or do you want to go out and grab those couple items to the grocery store? I'm putting the power in her hands to make the decision. Now, regardless of what happens, if I go to the grocery store and it takes me 2 hours and all the vendors show up at that time and she's running around, as terrible as it is, reality is you're the one who made that decision to go. So she'll rethink what she's doing maybe next time and leave it in your hands to identify. Oh, Servile. I've found myself in that position so many times that I've learned my lesson. And again, start now. If you do it in a year, all of a sudden they're going to start thinking that you are, that you're not willing to do the work anymore. Something's happened, something's changed. They're not willing to do what's required of the job, when all they really have no idea of is that this has gotten in the way. And that is the creep factor. The wonderful creep factor. This is, again, something that can be a little difficult to manage. And at its core is, again, what Starkey calls the service heart. The service heart is that drive, that desire the desire for approval. I think that's one of the things that drive the psychological factor that drives us, a lot of us, to do what we do, is the approval that comes, or the smile that comes from being helped, alleviating their stresses of day-to-day life. So the creep factor, let's talk about this a little bit. One thing is that the most dangerous time for the creep factor is the first 2 to 12 months. So basically the first year. In the beginning, first couple of months is you're just getting used to things. You are, they're not really adding anything on to your duties yet, because they're still feeling you out. They're still getting a sense of what it is that you bring, how much from, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt this, but Greg just said hello from sunny Virgin Islands, and I just want to let you know, Greg, that I don't think anybody likes you now. I am joking, of course. We're in cloudy, rainy Texas, and I don't know if anybody else here is on an island. So we love you, but we don't, Greg. Anyway, digressing, I apologize for that. So the most dangerous time, you're filling each other out, you're still getting a handle on things. So the first couple of months is not a big deal. But once you really start getting into it and you proving your worth, they're going to start piling on from there. It's little bits. It's the smallest of the smallest tasks. Let's take an example of, let's go back to that whole grocery store example. And I bring this up because this is a huge creep factor. Oh, well, you know what? I want you to handle the groceries from now on. Sure, no problem. Quick trip to the grocery store, an hour later, I'm back. Most likely not. Usually, grocery stores, at least from my experience, are trips to 2 to 3 locations, maybe even 4. My previous job, we would have to, because of the variety of items, we would have to go to Whole Foods, Central Market, Kroger, and Eatzi's, which is a local place where you can get breads and prepared foods. And it got to, from this one quick trip, and it was a 4-hour endeavor. Something as simple as that, of just running. Oh, well, Peter, can you make a quick trip to the grocery store to pick up food for tonight? Sure. Well, I've got to get meats from Whole Foods because that's where they prefer. But my veggies, they actually like a certain mix that I can only get at Central Market. So now you're starting to add time to one after the other. You'll see that it, the time adds up. Oh, you're in New York. Okay, good. I don't feel so bad now. Well, Jim, I don't feel so bad. I'm glad you're in New York. I love to visit up there, and I'm looking forward to getting up there again. So, anyway, I'm getting really distracted today, and I apologize for that. This is the last one of this series, and I really appreciate everybody that's come and commented and taken a part of this. So again, apologize for getting distracted. Back on track. So it is the smallest of the tasks that can add up. Now, the creep factor isn't necessarily always a bad thing if you manage it properly. The gradual growth can lead to expanded job possibilities, salary increases, and even job security. All of a sudden you're doing everything for them, and your replacement is going to have a long road ahead of them to catch up and recreate that environment if you decide to leave. So, the question is who's responsible for managing that creep factor? Well, that's you. That would be you. The professional is primarily responsible for managing the creep factor. And that simply comes from you've on board, you've taken over, 70% of the personal life minutia that bothers the principal. So you've taken 70% of what they had at time A. But after a year, time B, now they still see that remaining 30% as 100%. So, well, what about a little bit here? What about a little bit there? Well, can you just do this quick for me? Well, it's not always that quick. Peter, can you run and grab my dry cleaning for me? Absolutely. Do you need it today, or is this something I can pick up on the way home or on the way into work? Or I've noticed every other day I'm having to go out and get your dry cleaning because it's necessary. Well, can we look at a service that maybe picks up and delivers on a schedule, and now we don't ever have to worry about it again? That is how you manage the creep factor. The best way to mitigate the creep factor is to document and communicate. If you have if you have a daily log, which is something I hugely recommend, eventually say your annual review. How is everything going? Well, I've noticed that my job substantially changed. Oh, really? Well, yes, I've noticed that in the past year I've had to do this X amount of times, which takes this much time and takes away from my primary responsibilities over here. Oh, okay. Well, so now if you document and you communicate, well, now maybe that creep factor has gotten so big that it justifies another person or a part-time assistant of some sort. That's when you go out and you find a service like Estate Management Solutions or another service that's in your areas to help with fractional estate management. I mean, somebody that you can call and that you can utilize for 40 hours a month for the stuff that is just absolutely driving you nuts and preventing you from getting your job done. If I have a feeling that most principals would be amiable to it, simply from a standpoint of, if presented properly, it will improve their lives. You're going to make a more harmonious environment from a standpoint of simple tasks to you're giving them facts. This is how we improve. If you're overloaded, your energy is impacted. You're not going to be smiling every day when you come into work. Well, that's important. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, the ladies in the house tend to be able to really feel if something is negative in the house. They're really in tune with that. Well, negativity can be contagious. So all of this stuff that we're talking about, service without being servile, the creep factor, all of these are things that just add and add and add and add to your job. And if they're not managed properly with good documentation and good communication, it is going to lead to the potential downward spiral of your attitude, which will, of course, lead to the downward spiral of your job. So be aware, document, and communicate. Just remember, your service heart is what's going to cause you to say yes. And sometimes, even when sometimes no is the most appropriate answer. A quick tip on the whole no thing, and this is a story from my past when I was a front office manager for Crown Plaza Hotels. So we had 300 rooms. Everything is booked. Sales and catering come to you and say, well, we want 50 rooms on this date. You check it, everything's booked up. Say, I'm sorry, there's no rooms on this date. There's just no rooms, period. It's a fact. So I would do that, and I would give them immediate answers, thinking I'm doing good by providing immediate answers. where I went wrong was I started getting the reputation of somebody that wasn't workable, that didn't want to, that didn't want I'm sorry, I got distracted again. I see that Greg's been up since 4:30, you poor guy. If you're planning for the wine, send some over this way and I'll make sure to do a taste test. Make sure it's okay for you. Anyway, I apologize for that. So you're responsible. The moral of the story is that you're responsible for managing that creep factor. Document, mitigate it, communicate. I was going on with the no topic. Yes. So what I started doing was I would say, you know what, let me get back to you on that. I would take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. At that time, I was a smoker. Go outside, smoke a cigarette, come back, check out a few guests, help a couple of people, then go back to the sales office and say, I'm sorry, but there are no rooms available. Now, all of a sudden, I became this person who is not willing to work with others to somebody who is diligently trying to make things happen, when all I was doing was giving them the same information. It was just perception. So, you don't want to sit there in front of your principals and just go, no, that's not going to work. You got to be political about it. You got to be politically correct. You got to, maybe you step away. Let me look into that for you and see if I can come up with anything creative. You come back 30 minutes later and you say, you know what, I really can't. Were you able to think of a way to how to make this happen? Again, we're making sure that they are in control of everything with us. They feel like they're in control. That is incredibly important. So, okay. The last slide. This is just some simple tips that are born of either some things that are in these slides that you've witnessed, you've seen, and just some observations. First one is open your eyes, ears, nose, and mind. If you're walking into a space in the home that you're in and something doesn't feel right, trust your gut and look for something, because usually something is wrong. Now, if maybe that is the HVAC is blowing louder than normal, or HVAC in one zone is running but in another zone is not. Maybe you hear a dripping noise or you smell moisture. Follow your senses. They are usually not lying to you. They're usually being very, very accurate. The cops talk about this all the time, is their gut feeling. I have a gut feeling about this. Why do they have a gut feeling? Because they've seen something 100, 1,000 times, and it is your subconscious saying something is wrong, but your conscious mind doesn't see it yet. So trust your gut. If your gut is talking to you, listen to it. The ladies have it. They call it maternal instinct. And I tell you what, it's usually spot on. Remember, whose agenda are you on? We talk a lot about various topics in these slides that all feed into this. It's the principal's agenda who you're on. Even if you're doing the absolute right thing, you are performing at 110%, they are following all the laws because you've guided them in that direction, but they feel like they've lost control. Well, that's because, I'm sorry to say this, you haven't done your job well. They don't feel in control anymore. Whose agenda are you on? Our job, again, is to, and I will say that is a term that I learned at Starkey, so I would consider that a Starkeyism. That applies to, they don't like the problems or they don't like the solutions to the problems that you came up with. They decided on something different. You've guided them in the proper direction, but they still say no. Don't get hurt by it. Say, all right, we'll get it done. And then under your breath or in the back of your head, you're saying, okay, we'll see you again in 6 months when we have to fix this issue because you didn't listen to me the first time. That's okay. Not your job to be right all the time. It's your job to guide the principal in the right direction. If they push back, whose agenda are you on? Your reputation is your future. Plain and simple. We talked about this in previous slides as well. This is a small industry. If you are misappropriating funds for nefarious duties, illegal acts, or whatever, that's embezzlement. These things spread like wildfire throughout the industry. And I'll tell you one thing, I would never hire anybody who, or support anybody who uses my money for their own ill-gotten gains, as they say. So your reputation is your future. Placement agencies, they talk to another. They're not disclosing personal information, but if there's a hesitation in their voice, we usually know what that means. Confidence is attractive, and arrogance will lose you the job. We talked about confidence. We talked about your abilities. You are a professional. You are someone who brings a set of skills to the table. However, if you go in full bore and you forget about whose agenda you're on, you will quickly find yourself out of a job and looking for something else. And then all of a sudden, you keep following this pattern, and you've got several 6 months, 1 year job on your resume, and placement agencies are looking at you going, why all these short-term positions? Well, the honest answer is because you couldn't get out of the way of your own ego. You believed you were right, and I'm not necessarily one to preach on this. I'm very stubborn. I'm very hard-headed. So I tend to get a little bit overly confident at times, and I have wonderful loved ones in my life that tell me when I'm being as much. So, but just remember, arrogance is not an attractive trait, but confidence is. Remember all the myths that we talked about. You're not a part of the family. You're not, if they fire you, you'll never talk to them again. If you quit, you'll also probably never talk to them again. They run out of money, you're out of a job. You're not a part of the family. So that is just a fact of life. And build positive relationships. Now, one of the things I will say about that positive relationship in today's, a right now example, I have wonderful people turning into this slideshow. Now, 6 years ago, maybe a little bit less, maybe about 4 or 5, I shuttered the doors of Estate Management Solutions to focus on a single client with my beautiful wife. And, the principals made it worth our while. It was wonderful. They were wonderful people. But the positive relationships that I've built prior to shuttering the doors, I was able to pick up the phone or drop people from the industry an email, and they seemed to be genuinely excited about hearing from me again. That's what relationships are about. So my success and is going to be partially due to some of those relationships that I built. So think about if you're in a job that you are, Greg right now is doing wine and table settings. Well, all of a sudden he goes into the wine cellar and finds that he doesn't have enough bottles of this preferred wine that Mr. and Mrs. want for the party. Uh-oh. Well, if you're not if you're not very experienced in wines, what do? Well, you call a colleague who does have experience in wines for something that is very similar. Yeah, you could probably find it on the internet, but how do you know if the information is true? You call somebody up from the wine guilds, somebody that you've met in a local meeting or association meeting of some sort that that you could pick up the phone and give a call to. These are, these real world examples. The relationships are very, very, very crucial to everything that we do. Now, on that topic of relationships, I hope that some of you will choose to build an even better relationship with the private service professionals that come to our Essentials course. This is the Essentials course is my baby. I put it together years ago, and it got very warm receptions. And the reason why I don't do it here on Facebook Live or some other form is because there's nothing better than sitting across from your fellow professionals and understanding that you're not alone in this world, in doing what you do, developing those relationships. There are people who still stay, who've been in my classes, who still stay in touch and have worked very closely together. So again, those relationships are important. On that note, you have my email address. You've got my phone number. I encourage you to reach out to me. Shoot me a text if there's something that you need. I'm not going to see it now because I had to hide my phone so I don't get too distracted. But shoot me a text. Ask me a question. Let's schedule some time to talk and see if I can't help you get over the hurdle that you're experiencing. Well, maybe I can find somebody who can. Actually, there's no maybe about it. I can find somebody who can help you with the direction that you're going in. Again, I know I've said this a dozen times. I really appreciate everybody who's tuned into this. I plan on doing more of these on a variety of different topics. So if there is something that you really want to hear about, I encourage you to drop me a line with the information. If not this go around at the end of this month on March 30th and 31st, which is our next Essentials class, I encourage you to register for the last class or the next class, which I should be having posted probably within the next couple of weeks. I'm going to lay out the remainder of the Essentials classes for the rest of this year. I just need to work out details with the hotel and make sure that the scheduling lines up, and I'll get that posted on our website. The link I just posted is a great way to sign up. Make sure you are informed of any additional Facebook Live or any additional classes that are coming up, any additional services, or even if we're coming to your neck of the woods and you want to meet with us and hang out for a little bit. We'd love to see you and have a cup of coffee or a beverage with you. This link right now that's coming up that you're going to see is where you can get more information on the Essentials course. It is a course that will help you increase your value. From a financial standpoint, think of it this way. When I write a manual for a home, it is between $15,000 and $30,000. When Charles McPherson writes a manual for the home, it's much, much higher than that. It's usually about over $50,000. So think of how much your value will increase if you have these tools in your toolkit. It's a lot of good information. We go into some of this stuff that we've talked about here and a little deeper, and some other wonderful stuff. I really do. I love the course, and I also love teaching it. So again, this has probably gone the longest of any of them, but I thank you very, very, very much for tuning in. Please share with your friends and family about Estate Management Solutions and our Facebook page. Encourage them to come and join us for a Facebook Live or watch these videos in their off time. It will be out there for everybody to view. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart, and I can't wait to connect with everyone very, very soon. Y'all take care, and I hope wherever you are, the sun is shining on you and you are smiling. Y'all have a great day. Thank you so much.